architecture across the African continent. Western media would have us believe that it's all congested cities, crowded townships and mud huts. But design and architecture have moved forward considerably, especially in the last 10 years. Here to talk to us about some of these developments, Think Africa Group's Terry Behan. Good morning, Terry. Always nice to have you.
Good morning.
You travel frequently. Now, today we're talking architecture. What are you seeing that is changing the face of the continent?
I think it's a bit of a throwback to our heritage from the 1960s. I mean, the 1960s was the heyday of architecture in South Africa and further afield. It was a sort of that period where Africa said goodbye to colonialism. And you have these amazing kind of architectural monuments like Black Star Square in Ghana. You have places like the University of Zambia. There's another picture of Black Star Square. You have pictures of places like Kenyatta International Convention Center. That's one of the cathedrals in Lagos. And just a wide variety of really dramatic architectural design that took place predominantly, that's Nairobi, in the 1960s and early 70s. Yeah. Since kind of then, there's been a bit of a hiatus. You know, there wasn't much to talk about sort of in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And now kind of what's happened is it's picked up dramatically, and we're seeing some really interesting designs and some really interesting architectural phenomena being put around the continent.
The one you didn't mention is the high-end retail design store Lara in Lagos. Tell us a little bit about this, but also other modern trends that you're seeing.
So Lara is a concept store that was designed by very well-known Tanzanian-born architect David Adjaye. Lara is a signature development that got put into Nigeria, into Lagos. Now, what's most interesting about that is that the architectural style was very African, but in a very modern and contextual way. Yeah. So what that tells us is that you can see a little bit of the video here, is that architectural style is modernizing in a very contemporary, classical African way, but it's not westernizing. Yeah. So it's very unique and it's very special. This particular store houses the top design items from the top designers across the country, designers from Cape Town, designers from Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and all over. So Lara has been a very exciting kind of retail development, but that's not really where the excitement is. I think the excitement is in what we call kind of human-centered design architecture. And in fact, one of I think the most impressive examples of that is right here, around the corner from these studios in Hillbrow, which is the sort of a outreach foundation that was transformed from a building that was quite dilapidated, built in the early 70s, and that has been kind of transformed into a very, very modern outreach foundation that does a whole range of different things. It facilitates dance classes. It facilitates counseling for the local community. It does a whole range of different activities. But what's most interesting about it is the approach that architects are taking. So architects, and specifically African architects, are putting the sort of design process and people at the center of the architectural process. And it's delivering some phenomenal results.
What about the public sector? Are we seeing hospitals? Are we seeing schools? Or that kind of architecture taking the step forward? Yeah, no, I think we've seen quite a bit of that. I mean, the Hillbrow one was quite interesting. It was very much an outreach centre. The part that was really interesting there was across the road from the outreach centre, they built a massive steel bench. Yeah. So all the young people who were passing by could sit on the bench and watch the dancers on the inside. This is it. This is it here. Yeah. And that was designed by... We missed it again. There we go. It's back again. That was designed by the guys from local studios around the corner in Brixton, by Thomas Chapman and their team. So that's a really kind of interesting innovation. You touched on Nigeria. Very interesting. Yeah, see, you're talking about a floating school in the Lagos Lagoon. Just show us that. So in Nigeria, you have a community called Makako. Makako is built around water. The community chooses to exist and live on water. Yeah. So they're essentially an aquatic community in the Lagos Lagoon. And what they decided to do was they had some challenges with education. So they had this big open space of water that they couldn't use. And you can see there from the images in the background that this was a school designed by a very well-known Nigerian architect called Kunle Adeyemi. And he and his team said, okay, how do we change the face of architecture? How do we create these kind of aquatic communities that are able to accommodate the mass
overflow of people coming into the cities. And the idea is very, very simple. The idea is, well, that you can actually take these people and we can start to house them on water, and we can start to educate them on water.
Yeah.
So this was the Macaco community was a bit of an experiment, but they've identified about 15 or 16 cities across the continent that are essentially coastal cities that are suitable for these kinds of developments.
Yeah. The future, what do you think the next 10 years is going to look like?
I think this sort of design or human-centered design process is definitely on the upswing. So what we're kind of finding is that architects are re-looking at how design and architecture is going about. And what they're starting to do is they're starting to look at different ways of thinking about architecture and putting people at the center.
Yeah.
One of the other places that we visited was in Kigali, or just outside Kigali, which was the Bottaro Center of Excellence, which was this amazing center that was, again, the South African professionals get a hard time sometimes on the continent.
Yeah.
But South African architects are doing amazing things across the continent. And you had a group from Mass Design come in, sit with the local community, find out what the challenges are, find out what the issues were, and they built essentially a cancer hospice, for want of a better term, in a most beautiful part of the country. They used local materials, they used local artisans, and they have built a world-class centre that we could all be proud of.
That's fantastic news. Tell us quickly where you're off to next, Terry.
I am jumping on a plane to Nairobi to visit our friends at the United Nations probably next week, and then I'm probably off to Accra.
Fantastic. Look forward to when you're back. Terry Behan, Think Africa Group.